Hello. We're going to be continuing kind of what's happening with the 20th century and how music is unfolding from the beginning and the roots of modernism. And today we talked last time about Milton Babbitt and kind of the hyper-intellectual academic serialism that he was putting in place. There's kind of a reaction to that. I wouldn't say necessarily a reaction because it happened alongside it, but this was a very different sort of thread. This one was more involved with maybe the intuitive, you'd call it, definitely improvisational. All the stuff that Schoenberg's theory of serialism couldn't really capture about music. So this is kind of the beginnings of what we would call the avant-garde in music. And there's one figure in particular who's kind of the grandfather, great-grandfather at this point of a lot of this activity, and that was John Cage. Composer, musician, philosopher. Cage he was born in 1912 in Los Angeles and lived to 1992. Very influential in his work, in his writings, in his his whole outlook on things. It's interesting. He became interested in composition very early in high school, and his parents, he kicked around Europe for a while. He'd gone to college. I think he went to Pomona College, but dropped out. Didn't quite like it that much, but came back and got involved with private lessons. And believe it or not, Cage actually studied with Arnold Schoenberg for a while. And the story I've heard is that at one point Schoenberg said to Cage, "You have no sense of harmony or melody. For you, music composition will always remain a brick wall." And Cage's reply was, "I will spend the rest of my life bashing my head against that brick wall." I've heard different versions of the story, but the fact of the matter is he did work with Schoenberg, was actually quite enamored of the 12-tone system, but then became kind of disillusioned with the music he was producing and was casting about for different things. He had kind of a tough time of it, kind of making ends meet. He took odd jobs teaching here and there, moved to San Francisco for a while, and ultimately moved up to Seattle, where he started working with a percussion ensemble. He kind of did the Fuller Brush thing, and he went around and knocked on people's doors, especially housewives who were home, saying, "Would you like to learn how to play in a percussion ensemble and compose?" And got people to sign up for it. The percussion instruments he got were basically found objects, he called them. He went to junkyards and got brake drums and everything and started writing music for this kind of makeshift percussion ensemble, and actually gained a bit of notoriety. While he was there, he was working, I think, at the Cornish School, and choreographer Merce Cunningham came through, and he and Cage became lifelong friends. In fact, they became a couple, and Cage was just really taken with Cunningham's approach to dance. Ultimately, Cage wound up moving out to New York. He took a side trip to Chicago and everything, and in New York, kind of really fell in with the avant-garde art crowd at the time. Jackson, Pollock, Modigliani, all those guys, and not Modigliani, whoever. But he became kind of a figure on the scene. And Cunningham said, "Hey, I'd like to do a tour, and we could use your percussion stuff." Well, the problem is that it was too expensive to have a whole percussion ensemble go on tour. So Cage thought of himself as an inventor. His father was an inventor, and he came up with this bright idea of a thing he called the prepared piano. And basically, he turned the piano into a percussion instrument by sticking things, erasers, paper clips, and such like that, in between the strings of the piano. And instead of a piano sound, a very clanky sound would come out. And basically, he could then be the entire percussion ensemble himself, accompanying Cunningham while he did his dances. And it's actually pretty cool music. I'm going to play you one of his prepared pieces. This is his Piano Sonata Number 1. So not your typical piano sounds. Really, like I said, very inventive. I really think this is wonderful music. Cage was growing more and more disillusioned with just kind of the whole situatedness of music and how it fit in culture. And he was kind of casting about, obviously, he had a questing mind. And he happened to attend, right here at Columbia University, some lectures by the Zen Buddhist scholar D.T. Suzuki, who was introducing Zen Buddhism to the United States kind of intellectual world back in the late 40s and early 50s. And Cage found a real resonance with his kind of forming ideas about how to approach composing, how to live his life, what music could be. And as a result became the anti kind of hyper-intellectualized composer, in that his philosophy, composition should have no intention. It should just be. Sounds should be allowed to be themselves. And with this philosophy, he wrote what was his most famous piece called 4 minutes, 33 seconds. The length was chosen by what he called chance operations. I'll talk about that in a second. And basically, the piece is to be done just in silence. The performer comes on stage and just sits there for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. Now, if we were actually doing this in a class, I would perform this piece for you because it is kind of remarkable. At first, it's like a joke and it's kind of goofy and you sit there, but it's long enough that after a while you start noticing all the sounds around you. You go, wow, what is music? How is music defined? You know, this is kind of a big essential question now that we ask in the 21st century, you know, and you become aware of all these sounds. And that's exactly what Cage was trying to do, was to make you hyper aware of your being and your existence. And yeah, definitely, you know, steeped in Buddhist philosophy. Now, I'll just mention one more thing. And I've got a little experiment I'm going to do in class. But the one thing is that he explored through his studies with Buddhism what he called like chance operations. And he used the I Ching as a kind of the oracle for this. This was that system of, I wouldn't say predicting, but kind of reflecting upon possible futures by throwing sticks. And you would get these 64 different hexagrams or combinations of these sticks. And each one had a text accompanying it. And that would give you something to reflect upon about, you know, what might be in the offing. And Cage used these. Actually, he used in particular the aleatoric, he called aleatoric operations. Okay, aleatoric or chance operations to design and compose, again, taking his personal intention out of it, even though Cage pieces are totally recognizable as Cage pieces, but basically using this chance operation to really kind of craft the entire sound. And he did this in his writing too. I just want to show you an example of that because it's kind of fun. Yeah, let's see here. Where is the one that I wanted to show you? Okay, yeah, that's it. Okay, this is from his book called Silence, and it's a lecture on nothing. He lectured quite a bit, and they were just incredible performances because he would actually time it out. And you could see that his texts are basically informed by these chance operations, you know, how they're laid out on the page, how they're read. And I got a real kick when I discovered these when I was much younger. I just thought, wow, this guy got away with something. You know, the texts are just wonderful. I am here and there's nothing to say. If among you are those who wish to get somewhere, let them leave at any moment. What we require is silence. But what silence requires is that I go on talking. So, you know, just really fun stuff like that. Yeah, and Cage's approach and his notion of kind of exploding what music could be, again, everything that Schoenberg's theory didn't talk about, found real resonance in a lot of performers and composers and artists in the world. So we'll talk about that in the next video.